Hello everyone, my name is Kay. Today I'm going to be sharing how I am planning to get to $1 million net worth by using rental properties before I reach my retirement age. So without further ado, let's begin. These are the 3 strategies that I will be embarking on in 2024 or starting 2024 to get to $1 million goal. The first one is living below my means. Second is buying assets. Third is paying down debts. The first one is living below my means. Simply put, this is just trying not to spend more than what you earn. By far, this has been one of the most common advice by everyone, but having said that, it is not always the easiest to execute. Reason because of lifestyle creep, which I will share with you later. The key point here is not to save and save till a point that I'm being too cheap. Rather, I should start saving with a purpose in mind. Just by understanding my spending habit will determine whether I'm on the right track. Given this scenario between a sports car and an SUV, I will rather go for an SUV which gives me the functionality that I need. I have a family of 4 which obviously doesn't fit into a sports car which can only seat 2 persons. Sometimes I do fancy going out on a short trip just to relax and recharge. There is a way that we'll be able to make sure that we are not overspending. First, by identifying what kind of lifestyles do we want to go for. Using these slides, I'm trying to illustrate the difference between each of these lifestyles. I will be staying put in Singapore when I retire. France is obviously one of the furthest places. It is going to cost more because things there are not cheap. Australia, on the other hand, is nearer to Singapore. A flight to Australia may take between 5 to 6 hours depending on the location. Things are usually cheaper over there, but not exactly cheap as well, sometimes depending on where you go. But I will consider that as a lifestyle that is much more modest. Now, since I'm a Singaporean and I will eventually be living in Singapore, I do not need a whole lot of expenses living in Singapore, so I will put that as basic. Let me quickly touch on what do I mean by living below our means. Now let's assume that I have a household income of $4,863 and my monthly expenses is $2,913. By subtracting the expenses from the household income, I'm getting a cash flow of $1,950. However, it is by no means able to make me live a rich life, but it is still a fantastic savings rate that I can use to kickstart in growing my money right away. If I will be traveled to France, for a couple living in France for a week, that will cost me $15,554. I have a family of 4. If I were to plan for a travel, it will be all 4 of us going at the same time. So, taking $15,554 multiplied by 2, that gives me a total of $31,088. The savings that I will need to have on a monthly basis will be $31,088 and divided that by 12. That will give me $2,590. This number is obviously below the $1,950 savings or cash flow that I have calculated earlier. That is a deficit of $640. Now, if I decided not to work anymore, the scenario will be slightly different. I will have no more income from work, and based on the anticipated monthly savings or monthly cost that I will need to cater for traveling to France for a family of 4, adding that to the expenses of $2,913, which still stays the same, I will need to have a cash flow of $5,513 if I retire now. Now let's quickly jump over to a modest lifestyle. If I will be traveling to Australia for a week, the cost will be $2,948. Using the same template for a family of 4, 2,948 multiplied by 2, the total cost will be $5,896. The monthly cost or the savings that I will need to have in my bank account every month will be $5,896 divided by 12, and that will give me $491. Comparing that to the savings that I did earlier, I have a surplus of $1,459. Now again, if I decided that I will no longer be working, taking the anticipated monthly cost of $500 added to the expenses of $2,913, the cash flow that I will need will be $3,413 every month. To put this into perspective, these are the savings needed by a lifestyle. For an extravaganza lifestyle, I will need $5,513. For a modest lifestyle, that will be $3,413. And for the basic lifestyle, it would just purely be the expenses, and that will be $2,913. So after getting the savings rate out of the way, the next thing that I will need to focus on is by buying assets. In his book Rich Dad Poor Dad, he has specifically mentioned that assets put money into your pocket and liabilities take money away from your pocket. Hence, my home is not actually an asset, as we will need to make payments to upkeep the house. So instead of relying on our house, fund our retirement, I will need to look somewhere else, and that will be rental properties. There are 3 basic rules that we need to follow. Rule number 1, location is always the key in running a successful landlord business. As the experts always say, you can change the house, but you can't change the location. Ideally, making a trip to the location will be very helpful to determine whether you are buying the right property. Rule number 2, always make sure that there is positive cash flow after deducting all the expenses. Never buy a property that doesn't give you any positive cash flows. Make sure to run the numbers. This includes property taxes, insurance, operations, and capital expenses, property management fees. A good rule of thumb is to deduct 45 to 50% of the monthly rental income. Let's make use of an example. Let's say you have a rental income of $1,000. After deducting the expenses, which I'm using 45%, and that translates to $450, and the debt service, which is the mortgage, of $800, you have a negative cash flow of $250. It is always highly recommended not to even touch that property. Just move to the next property until you find one that is able to give you a positive cash flow. Rule number 3, do not over leverage. Just like what I mentioned previously, there are expenses such as property taxes, insurance, repairs that may be unplanned. Assuming you have acquired a rental property, it will be much wiser to monitor the property for a while. Work with a property manager to manage and rent out the unit, get the initial income, make the mortgage payments, and set aside emergency funds before embarking on the next property search. Also, making payments on time will help increase your creditworthiness. And in future loan application, this will make your credit more desirable for the banks to want to loan you money for the next property. Take this chance, make use of this time while stabilizing the property to build up the cash flow for the next down payment without even touching your own cash. So now let's assume that you have acquired a couple of properties. Let's take a look at the number of units that we will need in order for us to get to a savings rate to fund our different lifestyles. For an extravaganza lifestyle, the savings needed is $5,513. Now let's assume that there's a positive cash flow of $250 per unit property. Taking $5,513 and divided that by $250, that will give us approximately 23 units needed in order to reach a real cash flow of $5,750. This will be more than enough comparing to what is needed. Similarly, for a modest lifestyle, the savings needed is $3,413. Using the same rental cash flow that we are getting per unit, we will be needing approximately 14 units in order to give us a real cash flow of $3,500. Moving on to the basic lifestyle, based on expenses of $2,913, the calculated number of units that we will need will be 12, and the real cash flow will be $3,000. Well, that is a lot of properties to acquire in order to fund the lifestyle that I want. What if there is a faster way to reach the goal in a fraction of the time? And this is where I will get to paying down the debts. And these I'm not referring to the consumer debts like your credit card, student loans. Rather, these are the good debts obtained from the acquisition of the rental property from earlier. I don't know about you, buying just one property is stressful. Going through 23 times, that's really unnecessary, given I'm already 45 years old. Okay, so let's assume I've acquired a portfolio of rental properties so far, and each of them is generating $250 cash flow every month. A cash flow war chest of $1,500. Using this $1,500 cash flow and apply to the principal of the first rental, I can reduce the loan from 30 years down to 7 years. I will then be able to remove the debt service of $850 for rental number 1 and thereby increase the overall cash flow to $2,350. Now, by taking the new cash flow and apply to the principal of rental number 2, I will be able to pay down the debt for rental number 2 to 4 years. Rinse and repeat the process until you pay off all the properties. To give you a snapshot of that payoff snowball, assuming by 2023 we have already 6 rentals acquired with a cash flow of $1,500, the available cash flow after paying off rental number 1 will be $2,350. As I continue to make use of the new available cash flow to pay off rental number 2, it will be only 2034 and with a new bumped up cash flow of $3,200. By reusing the cash flow and apply it to the next debt, I will be able to pay down the remaining rentals very quickly, a few years just before my retirement age. As you can see, by the end of the 18th year, which is 2041, I will have 6 fully paid assets generating a passive income of $6,600. This is a very healthy monthly cash flow that is good enough nest egg for me to write out my remaining years of my life. Now, if I plug the new numbers back into this table, you will see that for living an extravaganza lifestyle, instead of the 23 units that I will need to acquire in total, I will just need to have 5, and the new cash flow number will be $5,750. For a modest lifestyle, I will only need 3, and that will give me a real cash flow of $4,050. For the basic lifestyle, I will just need 2 properties that will already give me $3,200 of cash flow. This is the total net worth that I will be able to get after paying off all 6 properties, each valued at $200,000. So my total net worth will be $1.2 million with a monthly passive income of $6,600. And the calculated withdrawal rate that I'm getting out of my investment is 6.6%, which is fantastic. While it is not necessary to have 6 rental properties, just having 2 will be more than enough to improve my financial position. So here you have it, becoming $1 million net worth before my retirement age.